Testing. Is that better? Good. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. I'm Councillor Lynn Stagg, Cabinet Member for Traffic and Transportation. Please be assured that we have put appropriate cleansing and social distancing measures in place to ensure that this meeting is undertaken in a COVID-secure manner. This has included a request for all attendees to have taken an LFD test within 48 hours of the meeting, the use of the NHS Track and Trace app or 10D logger, 2 metres social distancing, the wearing of masks when not seated, a one-way system in the Guildhall, and a temperature check upon arrival. I didn't notice having a temperature check actually, but there we are. Limited public seating has been made available. However, this meeting is also being webcast to allow the public to attend remotely if they so wish. Please be advised that the public seating area is not in view of the camera used to webcast this meeting. Can I please ask members to remain seated throughout the duration of the meeting and to wear a face covering unless seated. Please only use seats marked with a green circle. These seats have been allocated to ensure 2 metre social distancing. And some housekeeping information. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairway. Do not attempt to use the lift. Please assemble in the turning circle at the end of King Henry Street, past the University Park building. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust Fire Marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at the Guildhall reception desk should sign out when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. Everyone speaking via microphone be on camera, including those making deputations. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. Please, can everyone use the microphones and remember to switch them off when they have finished. Right, introductions. So I've introduced myself. Councillor Heaney.
I'm Councillor Graham Heaney. I'm a Labour Group spokesperson on traffic and transportation.
Councillor Bosher.
I'm Councillor Simon Bosher. I'm the Conservative spokesman for traffic and transportation.
Mr Dobson, welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Stagg. Mike Dobson, on the committee of the Friendsville Portsmouth Association, leading on traffic matters.
Martin.
Martin Lavers, Assistant Director for Regeneration, looking after infrastructure.
Felicity? Yeah, sorry. Oh. Pardon? Right. Right, okay. Felicity.
Felicity Tippery, Transport Planning Manager.
Hayley Chivers, Strategic Transport Lead.
Gareth James, Future Transport Zone Project Manager.
Michelle Nove, Safer Travel Manager.
Wayne Layton, I'm a Finance Manager.
Jane Didino, Local Democracy Officer.
Steve?
Stephen Flynn, Principal Traffic Engineer.
Paul Darlow, Traffic and Network Manager.
Thank you. I believe there are no apologies, is that right, Jane? So we can go straight in, yes? Declarations of members' interest. Councillor Heaney, have you got any interest to declare?
No interest to declare, no.
Thank you. Councillor Bosher?
None from me, Lynn.
Thank you. Right, we go on to the first item then is the Old Portsmouth Area Traffic Study. Who's presenting this? Steve, thank you. And then I'll come to you, Mr Dobson, to make a deputation afterwards. Thank you.
This report is about the Old Portsmouth Area Traffic Study. The purpose of the report is to highlight and agree the findings of the Old Portsmouth Area Traffic Study and to seek approval to further develop identified highway interventions and conduct a review of related council policy as discussed in the study report. The Old Portsmouth Traffic Study was commissioned as a result of the Old Portsmouth Traffic and Road Safety Working Group, which was set up to provide resident groups in Old Portsmouth an opportunity to discuss traffic and road safety issues that they were experiencing in their area. The traffic study was subsequently commissioned to establish the scale of the traffic issues raised in that working group and was undertaken in close conjunction with residents. The scope of the study and key areas of focus were agreed with the working group at the start of the project. The key theme areas identified for investigation were around speeding and traffic volume, lack of safe crossing facilities, and congestion around school pick-up and drop-off times. These were the three main areas that the study focused upon. However, congestion stemming from the White Link terminal and some road safety concerns at two nearby roundabout junctions were also included. The study report ultimately resolved to make several recommendations. First of all, once the report was agreed with the stakeholders, the report would be acknowledged formally by the member of Traffic and Transport at a Cabinet meeting. Second, to progress with feasibility work to develop the schemes as recommended in the study report in conjunction with members of the working group. Third, to progress proposals for a school street at St Nicholas Street for St Jude's School to address the concerns around the traffic congestion and air quality. I should note that a trial period has subsequently been brought forward for that and ends on the 5th of November. Fourth, this report provides the report provides an evidence base to support a bid to fund delivery of the identified interventions as detailed and in line with the schedule set out in the study report. Fifth, to undertake a review of existing policy related to speed measurement and analysis and pedestrian crossing assessment to reflect changes in national policy and best practice. Sixth, to review identified accident cluster at Cambridge Road roundabout and take action if necessary as soon as possible. And seventh, to pursue funding opportunities to implement safety measures at the Kings Road roundabout. The Cabinet report recommends that the findings of the report are acknowledged and agreed. It also recommends that authority to develop schemes in conjunction with residents and to pursue funding opportunities to implement the developed schemes is delegated to the Assistant Director for Transport.
Thank you. Mr Dobson, would you like to make your deputation now?
Yes, please. Thank you, Madam Chair, councillors and officers. I'm here to support this item. My purpose is to welcome the issue of this report and to thank all those who have worked so hard to complete it, despite the multiple challenges of shortage of staff, lack of resources and delays caused by COVID. FUPA notes that successive Cabinet members for Traffic and Transportation of different parties have commendably maintained the political initiative, and we appreciate the efforts behind the scenes of our ward councillors. In particular, I wish to highlight the sterling efforts of Mr Stephen Flynn in pulling together this report. There are several benefits. It shows the merit of taking a holistic approach to traffic problems instead of applying short-term piecemeal measures that create problems elsewhere. It engages the local community in working with the council to identify solutions, and it encourages outside scrutiny of the approaches, assumptions and assessment tools used by the council. When Councillor Elcombe was the Cabinet member, he suggested that if the working group was successful, it could be a suitable approach to use in other wards in the city. Councillor Fleming continued this policy. The delivery of the OPAT's report shows that community engagement will be key to success in other parts of the city where residents feel equally strongly that their communities are blighted by the dominance of congestion-creating and air-polluting motor traffic. It's worth recording the context of how this came about. The first meeting of the working group was over 6 years ago in the Duke of Buckingham Public House, where attendees could hear and see speeding traffic roaring up and down the high street and view for themselves the difficulties and dangers for pedestrians to cross the road. Initial work included several traffic surveys of varying reliability, and these were the catalyst for consideration of the methods and tools used by the council. What became apparent were the inconsistencies between how the council assessed the demand for extra capacity for motor traffic and how it assessed the need for infrastructure for vulnerable road users. Two brief examples. When PCC planners consider major developments, they automatically assume growth in demand for driving and so state a case for building more roads. This induces demand. But if you build more roads, you don't reduce congestion, you simply encourage more people to drive. But when the council considered requests for pedestrian crossings, the assessment method omitted consideration of potential growth in walking and merely counted the number of actual pedestrians, thus building the well-known principle of suppressed demand into the model. Similarly for traffic speeds, the meaningful criterion used by the Department for Transport and Highways Agency is free flow speed on the nation's roads, where periods of traffic congestion are excluded from the calculations. However, the method used by the council had included periods of congestion where traffic is crawling or even stationary, so lowering the average speed and undermining the case for traffic calming. Both of these models had built-in bias against pedestrians. Noting that Local Transport Plan 4 aims to prioritise walking, cycling and public transport, it's evident that for decades, Port City Council has been undermining its own policy of encouraging active travel. I sense this is changing. I applaud the frankness of officers in recognising that the purely quantitative methods need to be improved and to look for best practice in other authorities. Besides welcoming the report, it's important to note that much of the information collected was some time ago. Things are not static. A recent improvement is the welcome School Streets initiative for St Jude's Primary School. And also we look forward to the completion of the Shipwrights Way long distance path, something that should have been done in 2013. However, besides the long-standing problems of speeding, shortage of safe pedestrian crossing points, parking demand greater than on-street parking capacity, infrequent bus services, substandard traffic lanes, road traffic incident hotspots, congestion and risk of gridlock caused by queuing traffic for the Isle of Wight ferry, illegal parking often on pavement, and unnecessary and illegal engine idling, new problems have arisen. We fear increased rat running by highly polluting vehicles whose drivers seek to avoid the clean air zone charges. HGV deliveries to the Portsmouth Grammar School cause significant disturbance and hazards to Penny Street and Peacock Lane residents. And planning applications assume that the streets in Old Portsmouth have ample capacity to absorb extra parking demand. However, we've noticed several flaws in the assessment method recommended by the Planning Department. So we look forward to technical discussions with officers. To conclude, FUPA recognises that the delivery of this report is simply one stage, and there is a lot more to come, including design and public consultation. Please be assured that FUPA will continue to work with the Council to achieve the LTP4 vision that by reducing private car journeys where possible and prioritising everyday walking, cycling and public transport, Portsmouth will become a more pleasant, fairer and prosperous place to live, work and visit. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr Dobson. Councillor Bosher, any questions, comments?
No, I don't have any questions, to be quite honest. Make some comments later, though.
Councillor Heaney?
I had a couple of questions, actually. The reference to Cambridge Road in paragraph 4.3, Cambridge Road roundabout being identified as an area where there have been a number of cycle casualties. It says that there's a distinct cluster, which I think is interesting, and it says some additional signage has been commissioned as a short-term measure to address the identified clusters, with further study recommended to explore the options. I'm just wondering where that particular site sits within the assessment of cycle casualties and cycle danger, because clearly we have a number of sites in the city where cyclists have been at risk or reported near misses, and I'm just wondering where it sits within that and what sort of priority is given to dealing with the issues that have arisen as a result of the roundabout.
Does anybody know that? Michelle, do you know?
I'm afraid I don't know off the top of my head, but I can certainly get that information for you.
Okay, that'd be really helpful, yeah.
In relation to the other sites that we have been looking at for future funding, where that would sit within that list.
Right, thank you.
That would be really helpful, actually. Thank you.
Anyone else? Paul, do you know?
All I would say is that majority of the other roundabouts around the city have had some kind of attention. Either they've had substantial works with build-outs and lining, etc., or they've had the sort of be aware of cyclist signs put up on them, and this is one of the roundabouts that has now had that signage applied.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Heaney, or would you like more detail?
That's okay. I've got some more detail coming out, and Michelle's promised to provide some more answers about that. So that's right. The other question was, it was just one I asked at the briefing, and it was just that I looked through the report and I mentioned that it mentions the stakeholders, but we don't really get a list of who the stakeholders are, and I'm assuming obviously the White Link, the Grammar School, the residents group and so on, but we don't really know who all the stakeholders were. And I did say it might be useful to have it there somewhere so we actually know who has been consulted about this.
Steve, you know that one, don't you?
Yeah, I thought there wasn't a list at the briefing, and I've had another look through, and I must admit I did get this today, but I haven't a chance to look through that. I didn't see a list there. But
Apologies that was omitted. So we had FUPA, obviously, we had the Old Portsmouth and Gunwharf Quays Residents Association, the Spice Island Association, we had both schools, so the Grammar School and St Jude's, we had the local police and PCSOs involved, we had some involvement from Portsmouth Cathedral as well, as well as residents of St Nicholas Street and Poynings Place, and all the local ward members.
yeah, okay.
I think it's fairly comprehensive. Yeah, thank you. Anything else? No comments? Okay. Councillor Bosher.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Thank you, Mr Dobson, for your very eloquent deputation. I think I was involved in this with some workshops when I was a cabinet member as well. So it's taken its time getting here, but I have to say it's a very thorough report. I think there are two issues. On the broader issue, I listened to everything that Mr Dobson said, and it's very much Old Portsmouth-centric, because that's what we're looking at. But I could sit there and I could listen to it from a Drayton and Farlington point of view and think, that's true here, that's true there. And I think probably any ward councillor could probably follow those same sorts of principles listening to that deputation and think that applies in my ward. I can think of plenty of examples in my ward, this ward, that ward, where that is potentially applicable. So it will be interesting to see if this is some sort of template, because it clearly is in that respect, how it actually works through and how successful it is, and whether it is something that can be used for other areas of the city going forward, which will have similar, but obviously the geography and the layout will be different, but similar issues around what they're talking about. I mean, certainly when I came down from Farlington about 3 o'clock, I happen to have an infant school in my road. What a nightmare that was. I could have spent ages there with my camera phone taking pictures of illegally parked cars and sending them into the traffic wardens, to be quite frank with you. So I think it could be translated all the way through. I'm completely supportive of it. We know, and reference was made to the fact that it has been largely cross-party, primarily obviously Liberal Democrat and Conservative, because we've been the ones that have actually been the administration. So I would imagine that the Labour group are probably supportive of what we're looking to do here as well. I think from my aspect, I think the list of recommendations in 5.4 and the report that's going to come back, which is going to put costs against those, is going to be the interesting reports in that respect, and how we propose to actually fund it. But I appreciate that we've got to go through with this report, move this one forward before we can actually see how that sits, how much it's going to cost, because for every plan there is going to be a cost attached to it, and where that funding is actually going to come from. But initially, from my perspective, fully supportive of the report. Very thorough, very good report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, congratulations to Steve. And I know it's not just you, Steve. I know there's other people as well, but I know you've headed up, and it's taken you 3 years of your time, I think, altogether. So congratulations and thank you. I think one of the things about Old Portsmouth, of course, is a tourist destination as well, which doesn't help. It's not just your local traffic, is it? It's a honeypot, isn't it? So that does add to the problems. Right, I've got 3 recommendations. I've got so many papers here, I don't know which one is which. Pardon? Oh, sorry. I did ask you.
Flashing my light.
You said
we were taking questions first.
Oh, right, I'm sorry. My apologies.
Yeah, I just want to comment that, yes, I agree with Councillor Bosher. I do support this proposal. And I think it is interesting that we've taken an area-based approach to this, because very often when we're dealing with traffic problems, we often see a particular problem, and then we say, we have to deal with that, and then we don't always necessarily link that up with other things, and they can be connected. I did ask a question at the briefing about the funding priorities, and about whether, in fact, proposals from this will sit with other priorities and will be in different orders depending on whether we're going to take an area approach. So I think that's a decision we have to think about, because some of the things that might be introduced might be needed to be done, a number of things in one go, and therefore that would only work really if we did them all rather than did one and then left another few months or another year to do another one and so on. So we have to think about that, I think. I'm supportive of the idea of this, and just think that this may well put, as Councillor Bosch said, extra pressure on the budget, because if we're going to do these things in a more holistic way, it means we're going to have to change the way we think about doing things.
That, unfortunately, is easier said than done.
Well, yes.
Because we tend to get our funding for specific things. But you're right, I think, to set it within the context of the whole city. And I think that's happening more and more now, isn't it? I mean, there are local issues, but those local issues sit within the bigger framework of the city, because obviously, as an island city, we have major problems with transport. So... yes, I know that. I know. I don't want to leave you out, Simon, but most of the problems with transport are on the island, because obviously it's congested and very narrow roads. You've got a little bit more space. That doesn't mean to say you don't have problems, because I know you do. I did live up in Drayton at one time, so I do know the area. Right, I've got, I don't know if I'm reading from the right set of notes. I've got 3 recommendations. Notes the contents of this report. Agree the recommendations made in the study report. And delegate authority to the Assistant Director for Transport to determine the highway interventions to be advanced for future funding bids in line with the recommended schemes in the study report. I think that's a very important one, the vital one, that's identifying the funding sources, because it won't happen without the funding. So we have to try hard for that. Have I got all of them right? Because as I say, I don't know which one.
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
Okay, that's lovely. Well, I'm very pleased to accept those recommendations, and thank you as well, Mr. Dobson, because I know you've worked hard at, I was going to say pestering, I won't say pestering, but pressing for work to be done, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Second. Also, my apologies, Councillor Bosher, for omitting him from the roll of honour of Conservative Cabinet members.
Right, the next item is the e-scooter interim update. Who's doing that? Oh, Susie. Felicity, right.
Thank you. So, following the previously approved report at Traffic and Transportation back in February 2021 to participate in an e-scooter rental trial until November the 26th, this report seeks approval to further extend the trial until the 31st of March 2022. So to provide you with a little bit of background, on the 31st of July 2020, Solent Transport submitted a proposal to the Department of Transport asking for permission to operate an e-scooter rental trial in the Solent area. This aligned with the government's response to COVID-19, supporting a green restart of local travel and helping to mitigate reduced capacity on public transport, and could be funded through the Future Transport Zone programme, which is awarded to Solent Transport. So while the DFT e-scooter trials were envisaged to be for 12 months, this was dependent on start dates, and the Isle of Wight scheme within Solent Transport was launched in November 2020, and this therefore triggered the 12-month trial period for the Solent region. So this is why the Portsmouth trial is scheduled to end on the 26th of November 21, having only launched in March. So by extending the Portsmouth rental e-scooter trial, this will provide a full year's worth of data and help ensure any fluctuations caused by weather, major events, availability in residential areas and returning users are fully accounted for during the trial period. It's therefore recommended to the Cabinet Member for Traffic and Transportation today that firstly the approval of an extension to Portsmouth's participation in the trial is extended from the scheduled end date of the 26th of November to the 31st of March 2022. And that's to be achieved via the experimental traffic regulation order that's already in place for the trial and renewal of the vehicle special order. And secondly, agrees that if an extension is approved, a decision on whether to further extend to 30th of November 2022 to be taken at a further traffic and transportation meeting early in 2022. And that decision will be informed by further evidence that's gathered throughout the trial period. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, Felicity. Councillor Heaney.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions, I suppose, to start with. When obviously I was aware the Voice Scooter company do provide advice to the riders about what they should do. One of the things I wasn't quite clear about was what advice they give them on some aspects of safety. I think they're advised they should wear a helmet, but they don't have to. And one of the things I was noticing about the darker evenings is that obviously when people are riding scooters, you're less visible, and whether in fact they advise people, if not wearing lighter or more visible clothing, at least maybe to wear a sort of high-vis bib type thing, which would allow you to be seen. And I don't know what the company does in relation to that. And given that we're now into the darker evenings and commuting, it seems to me that would be a really sensible piece of advice to give to people, particularly if they're riding on when they're riding on the roads, because there's nothing worse than seeing, as one does, people who cycle without any lights or without any clothing, and you don't often see them until quite late on. So
that is one of the advantages of the Voice scooters, that they have got headlights.
They have got lights,
yeah,
they have
which
got
is
lights,
good.
yeah.
Can anybody...
I've got another question as well in a minute. Yeah.
Any one of you answer Councillor Heaney's question?
Yeah, we are working with Voy on that. We have a safety event in the Guildhall Square today where Voy are promoting safety, and they're giving away some high-vis equipment as part of that. And also we work with them on things like in-app notifications, so when people start their ride, open the app, it has notifications, and we're working with them on messaging, so we'll continue to make sure that darker evenings and Be Bright sort of messages are part of that.
I did see them as I came across, but I didn't have enough time to ask them because I had to be here, so I didn't get a chance to pop in and ask them the question. The other thing that I hadn't realised until just recently was they do have actually indicator lights on them, on the back. I've only ever seen one person use this when I've seen scooters driving and people changing direction. And maybe I'm just unlucky in seeing that, but I just wonder again what advice people are given about the use of this, because obviously cyclists, if you remember your highway code, always advise you to give hand signals about when they're turning. It may be a bit more difficult to do that on a scooter because of the balance issues. You just stick your hand out. Well, yeah, indeed, yes, and the appropriate sort of hand signals they should give as well when turning. But I just wonder if they're given any advice about making sure they use indicators and things like that as well, because I see very few people using them.
Gareth or Hayley?
Yeah, so again, events like the safety event, which we run monthly, they'll be giving that kind of advice. There is an online school that they can participate in, and advice on how to use the scooters is provided in that as well.
We were the ones who actually asked for the indicators, because I don't think they weren't at the time with other scooters, were they?
The original model when we launched didn't have indicators, and then they brought those ones in very quickly after launch.
Yes. Thank you, Hayley.
That's all the questions I have. I did want to make a comment, unless Councillor Rush has got any questions you wanted to ask.
Any questions, Simon?
Quite a few, Councillor Stagg. Apologies. Just looking at some of the survey and the key statistics data, I'm guessing I'm looking sort of at Hayley on this. I would like to better understand that you've got key statistics in 5.1, and it's got some wonderful figures there, and I did a little bit of maths beforehand just to sense check it in my own brain. What I would be interested to see some more information on is the CO2 equivalent saved. We're talking about 40.2 tonnes, which seems a decent figure, but I'd like to see the evidence behind that as best as possible, rather than just a figure that sounds great on paper, but it doesn't necessarily stack up, or it is open to challenge. And the number of car trips replaced, I mean, a touch under 60,000 in what was 199 days in that particular period seems an inordinate amount of vehicle trips replaced. Again, I'd like to understand that. Has that sort of come out of the survey in that respect? Because I'm just wondering how accurate that figure is.
Well, there were two surveys done as far as I'm aware, one by Voy and one by us at PCCs, so independent.
So it's survey-based data that we're actually looking at. But certainly the CO2, and I'm not asking for Hayley to justify it here, but a follow-up on that just to explain behind it would be good.
Hang on, Gareth has probably got an answer to that.
Yeah, so the carbon dioxide equivalent reduction figure, obviously a very important one, and so it's something that we've been scrutinising quite closely lately. So although I work as an embedded officer with Portsmouth City Council, I actually work for Solent Transport, and our director is going to be speaking up in Glasgow as part of COP26. Indeed. And one of the things that he'll be mentioning is the carbon dioxide reduction. So of course, that was another reason we wanted to scrutinise it to make sure it was right. So Voy and Beryl, who operate on the Isle of Wight, are both using all the correct techniques, and the Bayes figures that they should be. The mode shift figure of 44% is actually taken from the Voy survey, and that's the one that they use to calculate the carbon dioxide emissions. The Portsmouth City Council survey actually has a 56% mode shift figure, so if that's actually closer to the truth, then of course the carbon dioxide reduction would be even higher, which would be fantastic. So something that Solent Transport is doing at the moment is an additional piece of work which would inform any further decisions to basically to better understand, better scrutinise, and merely ensure that these figures are 100% reliable. And I'd be happy to follow up with you and provide some more details about the way that they're currently being calculated. Thank you.
That would be fantastic, Lynn. I don't tend to sit here and bore everybody on CO2 calculations.
Well, I'm just assuming, I may be wrong here, I'm assuming it's based on the number of miles saved from not driving a car.
It's based on, that's certainly one of the main considerations, but of course the calculations need to include Scope 3 emissions, so that's things like the durability of a scooter is important. The first generation of scooters didn't last long. They tend to last, I think it's closer to 5 years now, used to be closer to 1 year. And the way they're disposed of, how recyclable they are, all of these factors are all taken into account. So I think a few years ago there was some criticism of the way that some of the scooter companies were talking up their green credentials, and so they all had to up their game, both in the way that they deliver a truly sustainable transport solution and the way that they report it, so we're in a much better place than we were.
Thank you, Gareth.
Thank you.
Councillor Bowsher.
Just looking for a better understanding, Lynn, and certainly outside this meeting by email would be useful, particularly if we're sort of hanging our hat on these sorts of figures. It would have a better understanding on it. One of the other questions I've got relates to the survey data in 5.5. Was that just done as a generic city-wide thing, or is that data available to be broken down by postcode? It'll be interesting to see how that mixes across various postcodes, because I would suspect that the greater usage is probably in the south of the city rather than in the north of the city, but it would be just nice to see how that is broken down, if that's at all possible. Again, it doesn't have to be part of this meeting.
Hayley?
It's not something that's within the report provided to us by the research team, but we can go back to them and ask whether it can be broken down further into that, so we'll find out and let you know.
Thank you. And another one that's popped up, we've got a lot of locations of scooter racks around the city that are, and that's been expanded out in a lot of instances. And again, I'd sort of be interested to know, and it sort of follows on a little bit from the postcode data, do we actually have, and we probably do through Voy, usage data where the popular locations are and where the ones are that aren't used? Because again, that would be interesting. And I guess there is an element of in my backyard, because we've had a rack that's appeared in a very strange place in Farlington, right on the Havant Road, Eastern Road junction, literally right on the corner there, which doesn't strike me as the best location, but I'm sure those scooters are collecting cobwebs because they don't appear to have been moved. So a better understanding of the location usage would be good, because again, I suspect that along the seafront in the south of the city, the Guildhall area and stuff like that, the usage is probably outstrips some of the areas in the north of the city 10 to 1.
Gareth, you got any?
Yes, so we do have usage data. I believe at the moment the most used parking node is the Hard Interchange, which actually kind of tallies nicely with some of the survey data that shows that often it's been used as a last mile for multi-modal trips. And indeed, I was speaking to a couple of the staff who were based at the Hard earlier and said that that was the case. The way that Voi have tended to, I mean, at the moment, while it's still very much in the kind of the infancy of the trial, we're still some distance away from reaching that kind of critical mass that scooter operators would like to see, where scooters are going to be within a reasonable walking distance for most people in the city. So to some degree it has been a case of looking at where the opportunities exist, where there has been, where there have been requests coming in. But as the trial matures, it's now becoming more data driven. The draft scooter expansion strategy, which is Appendix A to this report, sets that out in more detail, and it's looking at things like where the app is being opened in parts of the city, but there actually aren't any racks at the moment. Well, that could be an indicator that racks are needed there. I think it is potentially the case that there will always be a few racks that are less well used and maybe are sort of gathering cobwebs, so to speak, but we need to be careful that we don't have parts of a city where residents just don't have access to this service, and that we try to keep it equitable. But again, that's something that I'm happy to go into further detail with you by email or conversation in future to kind of explain a bit more the thinking behind all of that. Thank you.
Absolutely no problem on that. Couple more. At one of the last briefings that we had on this, the number of complaints came up, and it transpired that all the complaints were actually coming from Voi ambassadors and not from members of the public. Has that figure substantially changed in its approach, or is it still all the Voi ambassadors that sort of go around with their little bomber jackets on?
From what I know, it still tends to be more the Voi ambassadors because of the difficulty of getting accurate information from the public. If you've got a scooter going past you and the two people on it, you've got to try and get the number, the reference number, and it's very small. We've asked why if they could make it bigger, but because of the nature of the scooter, they can't. So, but they have said that, they said, I think in one of the last meetings we had, that if you can get, say, the first two letters or the first two numbers, whichever it might be, and the location where you saw this and the time, they can look through their records and not necessarily always, but they've got a better chance of actually finding out who could it possibly have been. That's the difficulty, because people have complained to me, and they've been driving past in the car, and the Voi scooter's gone the other way. You just can't get hold of the information. But I don't know.
I've got two more.
Yeah, I don't know if Gareth and Hayley have got any more information about it. Gareth has.
Yeah, just I think the question was to some degree, are the reported figures kind of representing the totality of the complaints that are being received, or are there a lot that are going in from members of the public which we're not seeing in the reports? And it's true that at the moment those complaints from members of the public aren't in the reports, and I know that Voi are looking at a way to integrate those, but the reassurance I can give, and this was part of just looking at some figures from an FOI that I did recently, and there were I think the ambassadors, so there's 3 ambassadors out each day whose job it is to record these incidents, and they of the sort of 900 and something incidents that they captured during that time, during the same period of time, 48 complaints went in for members of the public to VOI. So I think with what Councillor Stagg was saying, that probably the bigger issue is it, can we make it easier for members of the public to report the incidents, rather than the fact that there's a lot of complaints out there that aren't being captured in the figures. Actually, the vast majority, I think 90% plus, are coming through in the reports.
I think the challenge is to make it easier for a member of the public to actually report it through VOI than actually rant about it on Facebook or Twitter, to be quite frank, because that's where most of the anecdotal comments come as much as anything else.
They can contact VOI directly.
Yeah, but I think there perhaps needs to be a bit more publicity around that aspect of it to allow that. I mean, I guess the route that I'm sort of going down is the fact that I think there is a degree of inevitability that we've got these schemes going on around the country, and I think I've said previously, incidentally, I've been in Bristol and I've been in Northampton, where they have a rackless system, and it is a nightmare. And whoever made the decision here to go with a racked system, fair play, because it does promote a degree of responsibility in how people actually leave their scooters. But I think there's a degree of inevitability that we are moving towards making e-scooters legal going forward. And I think what the VOI scheme is demonstrating, or I hope it's demonstrating, is good behaviour on scooters that can be translated when we get to the private e-scooters, because certainly I think VOI are getting tarred with the wrong brush in the fact that if somebody sees a private e-scooter, it sort of encapsulates everything all in one big thing. I mean, certainly the other, I had to pop up to QA last night, came back along the top of the hill. For those of you familiar with the road, there was a private e-scooter going along the top of the hill. He was wearing black, no lights on it, and you thought, yeah, okay, Darwin Award on its way. The only other question I've got, I think, I've got two more points, I think, is I'm going to need a bit more convincing, if I'm honest, about these sort of no-go and go-slow areas, because we were sort of sold at the beginning that it was, you literally wouldn't be able to ride on a pavement, but you would be able to ride in the cycle lane beside it. But actually, it's now something like 1.5 meters to 2 meters. So therefore, that encapsulates the pavement, or alternatively stops you it stops you riding in the cycle lane if it's the other way around, whichever way you want to look at it. But certainly, I've seen anecdotally scooters being ridden in areas that I would have thought would have been not able to be ridden, the promenade being one of them. Certainly at the last council meeting when we all took a break, there were 3 or 4 lads on voice scooters having great fun at high speed all around the Guildhall Square on them, and you thought that might have been a go slow area. So I want to have a better understanding of how that is dealt with and how that's enforced, because I'm not convinced it's completely working at this moment in time.
Hayley?
Yeah, so you're right, there are no ride zones and go slow zones in place. I think you've touched on the fact that the GPS is only accurate to probably approximately 8 metres, they say. So unfortunately, if the pavement is adjacent to a road, it can't be turned off on the pavement, because it would mean the scooters wouldn't be able to work on the road. The Guildhall Square is a go slow zone, so it is limited to 5 miles an hour across there. So yeah, any feedback on particular areas with issues we can take away and we can refine it. We're continually refining them with stakeholders and the public as they come in.
Yeah, they have admitted that their GPS isn't as accurate as they would like it to be. Whether that will improve in time, I don't know.
I would certainly hope it will do in that respect. And perhaps the last one is a suggestion that's sort of come out the top of my head, and it sort of comes along the lines of I think there is an inevitability that we're going to be going down the legal route with e-scooters at some point in the future, otherwise we wouldn't have all these schemes. What is the City Council and or VOI doing perhaps to engage with schools? Because clearly going forward the target audience is going to be more of that sort of age group than it is me, in all honesty. because a lot of the irresponsible scooter riding seems to be directed at the youth area, where there's an excitement attached to these sorts of vehicles. We've got the safety pop-up outside now for people to have a little go on it, but maybe there needs to be something more around engagement with, certainly with some of the secondary schools and whatever, about good manners when it comes to e-scooter usage, in the same way that you used to do safe cycling type schemes and stuff like that, because I think there is an opportunity there, if we're going to go forward, that we're not going to end up with a Wild West scenario that we possibly could have with e-scooters flying everywhere, is to try and instill a bit of good behaviour.
I think the problem is that the voice scooters, you've got to be 18 before you can ride it. So but if you chuck that into secondary schools, by the time they got to 18, they'd have forgotten all about it. They'd probably forgotten it by next week, let alone.
But I think there's always an education
College, places like
aspect
that,
to it
yes.
as well.
Hayley, did you want to say something?
Yeah, so we are working with our communications team to do that promotion. We're aware of the demographic, the younger demographic using scooters, so we are using social media such as TikTok to promote videos that will target that demographic more so. But yeah, you have to be 18, so we haven't gone specifically to schools at this point.
And having said all that, I do support the extension.
What about you, Councillor Healy?
Yes, I think the extension should be supported. I mean, I think we do need a full year trial of it, and I think we need to see whether there's any change in usage with the winter weather and so on. So a whole year trial would be valuable. I mean, I think we do have some challenges still with the way in which people use them. The riders realising their vehicles, and you should actually behave on the road as you would as if you were driving, and making sure people know where you're going. You're small, you're vulnerable, and so on. I think the perception thing is interesting from the surveys as well. The non-trial users think their problems are more than the benefits, but the users think the opposite. And we do have an issue, I think, that we're going to, in convincing people who don't use them, and I suspect a majority of people won't use them. So I think we have to think about how we're going to deal with that. Because I think Councillor Roche is quite right, is the voice scooters do get lumped in with the private e-scooters. People see an e-scooter and think, oh, it's because of the trial, and that's not fair. But of course, unfortunately, people don't always realise that. And they also, I think that the voice scooter trial sort of appears to give a licence to people to use the private ones, which of course it doesn't, but that's what some people think. I did discuss this with the colleges over the summer, Portsmouth and Highbury, of course, are now amalgamated, and also with the police. The difficulty we have at the moment about education, because I raised this issue about safety, etc., is that the majority of the ones that are used in colleges are private, and they are a problem. They shouldn't be ridden. If we had a situation where they were legal, then of course we could do more on advice and more on control, because the colleges could have some control over where they were placed and so on. I mean, I understand they were. I haven't checked with them since the term began because I've been a bit busy, but they were effectively, let's say, they were going to ban them on the campus because they were just dumping them all over the place, in corridors as well, apparently, as far as I was told. So we need to think about that later. I may have mentioned this before, but when I was at school, you weren't allowed to bring your cycle until you'd done the cycle proficiency test. So something like that has got to be introduced if we're going to have these things as legal, that people shouldn't just be able to pick them up and ride them. They have to know the rules, and particularly younger people, because they need to learn those things. I think we've still got a bit of a way to go. But I was very, very sceptical of these when I first heard of them. I just thought they were toys for boys, is one of the things I think I said. I recognise that they do have a real benefit, and I've spoken to people who use them more regularly, and they do have a benefit. So I think it's worthwhile continuing with the trial, and then we can see where we go from there.
Thank you. Yes, I just hope that the trials lead to proper legislation. How it's going to be enforced, I don't know. But I think it's legislation as well, not just for riders, but the actual quality of the scooters, because some of them are so flimsy, and that's one thing that's good about the Voi ones. They are really very solid, and I mean, I know you're vulnerable if you're on a scooter anyway, but if you ride properly, So I just hope it leads to legislation. So yes, I'm glad we're all in agreement. I'm happy to accept the recommendations. So that's approving the extension of the Portsmouth participation in the trial from the scheduled end date of the 26th of November to the 31st of March, and to be achieved via the experimental traffic regulation order, which is already in place, and renewal of the vehicle special order, VSO. And secondly, that if the extension is approved, a decision on whether to further extend it to the 30th of November 2022 will be taken at the next, early in 2022. And this decision will be informed by evidence gathered throughout the trial. So this is not an end to it. I mean, there's lots of gathering evidence all the way along the line. So I'm very pleased with that. Thank you, everybody. That was a quick meeting for transport.